good, Mark. I'm going to take attendance here, and then I'll check on everyone else. I see Plainview. Do we have Post and Smire?
Smire's here, but Lily Ellis isn't here.
Okay, thank you, thank you. What about Post?
Post is here.
Okay, very good. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to discuss the next essay. The essay number 2 final draft was due last night, and I'm not sure, some of you had problems submitting after 10 o'clock, and I went back in and checked. I don't know if it's anyone in this class, but I went back in and checked to make sure my settings were right, and my settings said midnight. So probably if you had trouble submitting, I don't think it was any of you guys, it was probably a computer issue on your end. Anytime you have a deadline and you need to submit it and it's not working, you need to email it to me, okay? I've got to have it by the deadline, regardless of whether or not the technology is working. I don't want it by email, but if I have to have it by email, then that's better than nothing, okay? For trading those. Now that we're done with essay number 2, it's time to turn our attention to essay number 3, and we're going to look at the instructions together. If you have any questions as we go through it, be sure to let me know. I'm going to go to essay projects and open essay number 3 folder, and I have my instructions here. You need to, we're going to go over them together, but you need to definitely print them off and go over them again yourself just to make sure you don't miss any of the finer points. For your third essay, you're going to write a process essay, a classification essay, or an extended definition essay based on one of the prompts below. Whichever prompt you choose must adhere very strictly to the guidelines for that type of essay. And we've talked about all of these types of essays, and we've talked about the things that each different type needs to include. This one needs to look like this, and this one needs to look like this. And the thesis statement for this one should look like this, and so on and so forth. Your essay needs to adhere very closely to the guidelines that we've talked about when we talked about the different types of essays. You need to refer back to your notes. Some things to remember for this essay: unless you're writing a process composition, you should not use first or second person, ever. And some of you struggled with that in essay number 1. In this particular assignment, and only for this particular assignment, if you're writing a process, and you're telling someone how to do something, like one of my students is explaining how to set up an altar for Day of the Dead. That she's explaining to her reader how to do it so she can use second person. So if you're giving instructions, you can use second person, just for this one, all right? And just if you're doing a process essay. If you're explaining something that happened to you, like the birth to my kid, I wouldn't refer to myself in third person. I mean, that happened to me. So I could say, you know, I wouldn't want to say Mackenzie went to the hospital and Mackenzie was mean to everyone. Mackenzie demanded to have the baby. That's what happened. I would say I went to the hospital. I was mean to everyone. I demanded to have the baby. So if you are, if you're writing a process, you can use first or second person as needed. All right. The process composition. Additionally, you're not going to consult outside sources for this paper. If you have to look things up on the internet for your paper, then you've picked the wrong topic and you need to pick something else. Okay, we will not consult outside sources for this paper because it comes with so many things that we don't want to have to worry about right now, like citation and plagiarism and giving credit and choosing credible sources. We're going to do that in a couple of weeks, as long as we can, all right? So if you feel like you need to consult the internet for your paper, you've picked the wrong topic, you need to pick it again. There are 3 phases to this project, each of which will be completed or submitted via Blackboard: rough draft, peer review, final draft, just like last time. Each of these count towards your grade for this project. The rough draft will be worth 10%, peer reviews worth 20%, and the final draft worth 70%. Remember, If you don't turn in a peer review, if you don't turn in a rough draft, you can't participate, and your grade starts out as a 70, and it's not good. All of your documents must be submitted in Microsoft Word, and I had a little bit of a problem with this in the essay number 1 as well. I can't open a GDoc, and Blackboard won't grade a GDoc, so it has to be in Microsoft Word, and it should follow general MLA formatting guidelines for font, line spacing, header, headings. It's not optional, and it's not open for interpretation. Everyone should look exactly the same. And this is the easy part. It's just setting up your computer. It's just settings on your computer. So if you're still struggling with how to set up your document to look appropriate, you can watch the video that's in the web bibliography, okay? The essay should be about 625 words in length. And grading your first essay, some of you just did an amazing job and told amazing narrative, and the movies that we watched. I was happy to see that some of you were inspired to write so much. But some of you, I don't know if anybody in this particular, some of my students were writing 12 and 13 and 14 pages for a 2-page paper. And even though I was, like I said, super excited that you felt inspired, we really need to limit ourselves to probably about 775 words. Sometimes we can't wrap it up in 625, and that's okay. But we really want to limit it to not too much over that, okay? All right, please note and observe the due dates on the course calendar, and remember, I don't accept late work for any reason. Your rough draft, we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, here's some possible topics. Now, if you have something else you want to talk about, that's fine. You need to run it by me today, after class or via email, and I need to approve your topic before you start on your draft. You can write an essay describing how to apply for a scholarship at SPC, steps in a bureaucratic process like getting a driver's license, becoming a citizen, applying for a marriage license. Explain how a certain ritual or ceremony is conducted in your religion, or other topics as approved. And like I said, I need those topics today if you want to do something different. Classification and division. This is when we created categories based on a common criteria and talked about how the categories are different. Attitudes towards politics, study habits, sports fans, extended definition, which is what we're working on this week, and there are 7 billion words that you could do for extended definition. But some good examples, kind of a jumping off point, you could talk about sexism, sportsmanship, maturity, citizenship. What does citizenship mean? What does it mean to be a citizen? And like I said, really, there's just so much that you could do with extended definition. Remember, it needs to be an abstract concept. We can't define desk, all right, in 625 words. It needs to be something that you can provide an original definition for, and then back that definition up with support, okay? Your rough draft should be a complete essay. Even though it's rough, we want it to look good because your peers are looking at your rough draft, and you don't want to turn in anything that you can't be proud of. Including a thesis statement, opening and closing paragraphs, supporting body paragraphs, appropriate MLA formatting. Remember, no first or second person unless you're writing a process. Additionally, your thesis statement should avoid announcing what you're going to do. In this paper, I will. This essay will discuss. We want to avoid that, okay? And this first rough draft, the rough draft for essay number 3 will be due Sunday at midnight. We will not have time to work on it in class. We go till the end of class today, and we still have a ton of stuff to cover on Friday. So we won't have time to work in the lab this week, even though it does indicate on the calendar that we will. We won't. We'll be in class lecturing on Friday. So you've got to mark out some time to work on this, okay, on your own. MindTap is due as well. We have a couple of things in MindTap. Any questions about that business? All right. The next thing that we want to do is go over our answers from the other day for our reading for better writing. Oh, there we go. Oh, dang it. There we go. I know that you had 6 or 7 minutes to work on it the other day, but these are kind of complicated. I'm going to give you another 6 or 7 minutes today to get back with your go over your answers, come up with the answers that you don't have yet, and we will reconvene in about 7 minutes to go over our answers. So get with the groups you were with the other day. Remember, I'm calling on people at random. I expect you to be able to speak intelligently and eloquently and at length about the answers to the questions. Yes, you can be with them. Okay. All right, 7 minutes. right, how we doing? Need more time? Yes? No? Post, Smire, Plainview, more time or no?
We're good.
Okay. Well, let's get started then. Let's see. So the first essay that we're going to look at is economic disparities fuel human trafficking. As your peers are talking about their particular essay, I want you to turn to that page and make notes in the text, because of the things that they'll point out will be important to you as you're preparing to write this type of essay. All right? Okay. So economic disparities fuel human trafficking is actually not an essay unto itself. It's an excerpt from a longer work, and it was really just this part of that longer work that had to do with definitions. So I'm glad that the textbook people didn't put the whole thing in there. Let's take out the pertinent part. So Dakota in post is going to talk to us about the answers they got for their 5 questions. Go for it, Dakota. And be sure, all of you be sure as you're discussing, to give paragraph and line numbers.
The first one, we got the second paragraph in the 4th sentence says, however, examine trends in the trade of human cargo shows that trafficking and slavery are extremely difficult to define and understand, and that they coexist with and are codependent upon each other.
That's a really good candidate. Yeah, that's a really good candidate. Another one that I might look at for the thesis statement would be the first sentence in paragraph 3. Human trafficking in particular is a term that is difficult to define properly, but it must first be clarified if the problem itself is to be addressed. And really what they're talking about here is human trafficking in this essay. So I think, although I think yours is a good candidate, Dakota, I think the first paragraph, or the first sentence in paragraph 3 might be just a little more precise in detailing what it is we're talking about in this essay, exactly what we're talking about. Okay, but good job. Okay, I'll let you keep going.
Human trafficking and slavery is what's being defined in this essay.
Alrighty, you can keep going. I'll interject if I need to.
Alright, and for number 3, it's paragraph 4, the writer breaks down what human trafficking and slavery is. And then for number 4, the writer uses...
How does that provide exigency? Exigency, remember, is explaining to the reader why it's important that we read this, why it's important that the writer has felt the need to write about it, and why should we as readers read their composition. So what did y'all think in particular was, how did the author provide exigency in that way?
The last sentence of paragraph 4, it says, nevertheless, this definition of human trafficking is a helpful starting point from which the United Nations and governments around the globe can start to fight the trafficking and eventual enslavement of people.
Okay, good. And we have another couple of places where exigency is provided. In the thesis statement, our author says we have to figure out what this is before we can continue with our discussion. So we have to stop here. I've written this definition so that we can better have a discussion about this larger essay that they're talking about. And also in paragraph 5, all difficulties of definition aside, human trafficking and slavery are real problems, historical problems that have taken new shapes due to globalization. In fact, today's human trafficking is linked to millions of people experiencing multiple forms of slavery, from traditional chattel slavery to sexual slavery to debt bondage. And so they tell us this is an important item for us to discuss because it's a problem in the world. It's a problem that we're facing globally. What support does the writer provide, Dakota, and identify transitional expressions for us?
Okay, she uses official sources from the U.S. Department of State and from the UN resolution.
Yeah, she uses credible sources to back up her definition, and she also does a little bit of compare and contrast with the difference between human trafficking and human smuggling to further clarify for us exactly what trafficking is. And what transitional expressions, Dakota?
We put at the end of introduction the writer transitions to extended definition to paragraph 2, the last sentence, and paragraph 3, the first and second sentence.
Okay, and we also in paragraph 3 have transitional expressions like for example, because our author is providing us with examples that furthers his or her definition. Top of page 239 we have however. In the middle of page 239 we have under this definition. So we're reminding our reader what it is we're talking about and leading them from one example to the next. All right. Good job, Dakota. Let's turn the page and look at our next essay, Deft or Daft. Jenny and Smire is going to talk to us about this one. Jenny, if you could just go through the questions, and I'll stop you if I need
to. For this thesis, we put the last two sentences of paragraph 1, and it says, what if deft and daft come from the same root and once meant the same thing? A quick trip to the dictionary showed that indeed they once did mean the same thing, though my wife thought me daft when I first suggested it. And for the term that's being defined, it's explaining what deft and daft are. And the writer provides exigency in the second to last paragraph by saying, this second to last sentence, it says, it is good to remind ourselves that one person's deafness might very well appear to be daftness to another. And the support and types of support the writer provides is, at the beginning he uses an anecdote about him and his family, and the transitional expressions he uses are gradually, also, and again.
Very good. Yeah, and Jenny, what do you think the purpose of this essay is? Like besides defining for us these words, what might his other purpose be?
His purpose is showing the difference between where they came from.
Right, and he's also, if you read the last line, it's kind of weird. This is David Shelf asking what's the good word. This is like a blurb from his weekly radio program. Like Paul Harvey or John Tesh, they give like tips for living human stories. So he's really, even though this is interesting information, he's really written this, or actually presented this on the radio, to entertain us. And we don't do that a lot in academic compositions, but that's what he's doing here. He's wanting to entertain us with the definitions of these words. Jenny's right, he provides an anecdote in the very beginning, the story that kind of sets up why he started thinking about the difference between deft and daft. And in the middle, he gives the etymology of the word. Does anybody remember what etymology is from the other day? The history of the word. Good job. History of the word. Yeah, kind of where it came from and how it evolved. So those are the things that he's doing. I like the exigency there at the end. This is an entertaining piece. I mean, it's really not like a human trafficking, like we have to fix this problem. But he does tell us it's good to remind ourselves where these words came from. So I think that does provide exigency. Good job, Jenny. Thank you so much. Let's turn to page 241 now. And on page 241, we have on excellence, and we're first going to hear from Veronica in Plainview. Veronica, if you could answer questions 1 through 3 for us on this essay, and I'll stop you. I'll interject if I need to.
Okay, for the thesis statement, it was kind of hard for us to find it, but we decided to go with paragraph 2, sentence 7 and 8, where she states, She thought herself capable of doing anything, and did everything she imagined, but nothing was perfect.
Yeah, you
For
have an interesting point there. I really couldn't find an underlinable thesis statement in this essay. So instead of it being explicit, where it's written there on the page, it would be implicit. It's implied by what the author is talking about. And I think if we were to write a thesis statement based on what the author has written, we might say that she is saying that excellence, the definition of excellence is different for different people. Right, because she's talking about what her excellence means to her and what excellence means to other people. So no really explicit thesis statement, but kind of implied. Okay, keep going, Veronica.
Okay, for number 2, the term being defined as excellence. For number 3, like you said, it's that she is describing lavish excellence of her mother's, which kind of influenced the excellence of perfectionism that she has. For in paragraph 4, she starts to introduce the word lavish. For the first sentence, it says lavish. My mother was a lavish as nature. And for paragraph 6, she starts to say, my own way is 1,000 times more confined. And a couple sentences down, she states that is how perfectionists are, saying to us excellence, and we will show you how we use up our substance and wear ourselves away while making scarcely any progress at all.
I love that sentence. I just really love that sentence. And it's to show us excellence to a perfectionist. Any of you perfectionists in here? I am, unfortunately. It's not a good thing, right? She's saying that it's not a good thing. We will say to us excellence, and we will show you how we use up our substance and wear ourselves away while making scarcely any progress at all. I love that sentence. Yeah, you've done a great job, Veronica. She provides exigency. You know, this again is not the human trafficking thing, right? Like that's a global issue that needs to be addressed. But this is obviously important to her, and she's comparing her mother to herself in different types of excellence. And she's kind of saying here, being a perfectionist is not necessarily a good thing. So. Very good, very good. You talked a little bit, Veronica, about the examples. Jasmine, can you take over and talk about 4 and 5 there?
I should go to the next one.
On number 4, when it says what support and what types of support, I think it was compare and contrast, because she's comparing herself to her mom and like all the stuff she does and how well she does it.
Good, and she's kind of telling us lots of little stories, right? Lots of little anecdotes about her uncle. She tells us lots of little personal stories about her mother. What else? Did you pick anything else out, Jasmine? I think you're right. She's definitely comparing and contrasting here. What else did you pick out?
That's the only one.
Okay.
I don't know.
In paragraph 4, we have the introduction of another word, lavish. And when we think of that word lavish, I think of like extravagant and luxurious. But she's saying in her definition, Plainview, if y'all will turn off your microphones. She's saying in her definition that excellence and for her mother, lavishness is the same thing, which is so unusual to think about. But then she provides us with examples about how her mother's lavishness was part of her excellence, all right? And so as you're thinking of words that you want to write about in your extended definition essay, you want to think about unusual associations that you can make, all right? And you can't just say lavishness is the same thing as excellence. Boom, I'm done. You have to explain yourself. You have to provide examples. But thinking outside the box and defining these terms in unusual ways and then explaining to your reader your definition can be really interesting to do. Transitional expressions, Jasmine, did you have any?
Yes, they're actually everywhere.
Okay.
There's whenever and finally in paragraph 1. In paragraph 2, after.
No, no.
Oh. In 3, as I go, she says a lot of, there's another however, and finally, and when. That's
Good,
all the
and
ones we found.
okay, and she's telling us stories, so those transitional expressions are appropriate, right? Because she's kind of telling us little vignette stories about her mother's excellence and her own excellence. So, good job, Plainview. Smire and Post, y'all did well too. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop here because my other we're not stop. We're going to change directions. We're not leaving. My other classes stopped here, and when we get here, we'll hear from our Leveland groups about the last example. What we're going to do now for the rest of the class period is we're going to take a look at a video that it's Logan's Babe, and it's a really, really good example of a definition composition. And it's a little bit long. It'll take us the rest of the class to watch it, but that's all right because it's an interesting video. And it's interesting not just in that it's a good example of extended definition, but it's an important topic. And you can tell that it's important to her by, the way that she speaks about it. I've texted this link out. We might have time to watch all of it today. We might not get to, it's long. But I've texted it out, and you can look to this particular example for ideas about how you want to structure your extended definition essay. And I'll stop the video in a couple of places to point some things out. So as we're watching it, what you want to be sure that you're looking for is her thesis statement. Of course, she's giving a speech, so she doesn't necessarily have a thesis statement, but you want to look for, if it were a composition, what's her thesis statement, and how is she advancing her definition, all right? Let us watch. Any of us have a microphone?
Big round of applause for Pumzile Malambo Nuka.
Distance students, if y'all could make sure all of your microphones are off, we're getting some feedback.
I thought that was the speech.
No, that's the person who spoke before.
Pumzile, thank you very much. Your words truly inspiring, an excellent way, an inspired way to kick off our He for She campaign. He for She, I must say, is a solidarity movement, a partnership between women and men based on a shared commitment to fight against the persisting inequalities faced by women and girls. And now let's turn to a young woman who has chosen to lend her voice to this very important solidarity movement. She's a leading an advocate for gender equality in her own right. She's been involved with the promotion of girls' education for several years. As part of her humanitarian efforts, she's visited Bangladesh, Zambia, recently returned, as we just heard, from Uruguay on her first mission with UN Women. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to this stage our co-host and the UN Women's Global Goodwill Ambassador, Emma Watson.
Your Excellencies, UN Secretary General, President of the General Assembly, Executive of UN Women, and distinguished guests. Today, we are launching a campaign called He for She. I am reaching out to you because we need your help.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there for just a second. So she's providing us there with exigency. Why is it important that we listen to her speech? Because she needs your help, okay?
And to do this, we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try and galvanize as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change. And we don't just want to talk about it. We want to try and make sure that it's tangible. I was appointed as Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop. For the record, feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities.
All right, so she gives us her thesis statement there. Feminism, by definition, is this. And she talks a little bit about what feminism is not. It's not synonymous with man-hating. It's something different. And so she's taking a commonly held view and redefining it for her audience, okay? And she's about to, in just a minute, start giving examples.
It is the theory of the political, economic, and social equalities. I started questioning gender-based assumptions a long time ago.
These are her examples.
When I was 8, I was confused being called bossy because I wanted to direct the plays that we would put on for our parents. But the boys were not. When at 14, I started to be sexualized by certain elements of the media. When at 15, I started dropping out of beloved sports teams because they didn't want to appear muscly. When at 18, my male friends were unable to express their feelings. I decided that I was a feminist, and this seemed uncomplicated to me. But my recent research has shown me that feminism has become an unpopular word. Women are choosing not to identify as feminist. Apparently, I am among the ranks of women whose expressions are seen as too strong, too aggressive, isolating, and anti-men, unattractive even. Why has the word become such an uncomfortable one? And I think it is right that I am paid the same as my male counterparts. I think it is right that I should be able to make decisions about my own body. I think it is right that women be involved on my behalf in the policies and the decisions that will affect my life. I think it is right that socially I am afforded the same respect as men. But sadly, I can say that there is no one country in the world where all women can expect to receive these rights. No country in the world can yet say achieved gender equality. These rights I consider to be human rights, but I am one of the lucky ones. My life is a sheer privilege because my parents didn't love me less because I was born a daughter. My school did not limit me because I was a girl.
And these are examples as
My
well.
mentors didn't assume that I would go less far because I might give birth to a child one day. These influences were the gender equality ambassadors that made me who I am today. They may not know it, but they are the inadvertent feminists who are changing the world today. We need more of those. And if you still hate the word, it is not the word that is important. It's the idea and the ambition behind it. Because not all women have received the same rights that I have. In fact, statistically, very few have been. In 1997,
Okay, and I'm going to stop it there. She goes on to give examples, more examples that further her definition, but I'd like for you to think about how, she takes a term that we have a negative association with. Even me, I'm a woman, and, all for women's rights, I have a negative association with that word, a negative connotation. And she turns it in and she redefines it for us so that at the end we can be proud to call ourselves feminists. We understand better what that word means. And she's given us examples to help further her definition. And she continues to do so after we've stopped here. So I'm going to text this out to you and you can watch it on your own if you need to. Look at it for an example. Again, we will meet in the classroom on Friday. We will have lecture. If you think of something else you want to talk about in your papers besides the topics I listed there, you have to let me know today. All right? I will let you go just a bit early. If you have any questions in between now and Friday, be sure to let me know. I'll see you then.